Welcome to the Appi Hour, where we explore real-world API security breaches and what they can teach us.
What you'll see is that app logic is important, but only after you secure your front door.
In this episode, I'm joined by Dave, our head of products, to break down recent breaches, from basic mistakes to surprising logic gaps, and what every team should be doing to prevent them.
As soon as you start guessing other people's apps, like, what if that's somebody's $1 million idea?
If you're a developer, security pro, or just curious how attackers really think, this one's packed with stories and lessons you can use right away. Dave, dude, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. This is exciting. APIsec University is one of my favorite webinar events. And so to be up on stage, it's awesome. Thanks for having me, Dan.
I bet a lot of people recognize your name, probably from meetings or other things, or certainly from the chat. So Dave is our head of products. He also is on the front line with our customers and our clients. So I really couldn't think of anyone better to bring along for this chat about recent API breaches, because this dude has tons of hands-on front lines experience with working with organizations, helping them get through API security, figuring it all out. As always, we've got a few announcements up front. So first thing is APIsec is coming back on September 11th. This is our 4th edition of APIsec. It's our back to school edition, which is a ton of fun. And you could see the URL. We actually have in the top right, you should see a little link. If you want to click on that and go ahead and sign up, you're welcome to do it. We got another month or so, but we have a really cool lineup. And our keynote is this guy, Eric O'Neill, from former FBI agent, who actually was the guy who caught Robert Hansen, probably the most damaging spy in U.S. history. And so we're going to have him on APIsec, so do not miss that. All right, that's APIsec. If you know anything about me, I have no meme game. This is the only thing I know how to make, which is the Ralph Wiggum meme. But we are launching a podcast for APIsec U, all right? And probably by the end of this session, Christine will have the URL ready. And it's going to be called the Appi Hour. Huh? You get it? Or API Hour, however you want to say it. But we're going to, if you can't always make it to these things, Dave, you're laughing. I know we're pretty nerd.
You're punny.
Sorry?
You're punny.
I'm punny. I know there's so much to do with API, right? So
Yeah.
we got the advantage. So let's dive in to today's session around recent API breaches. And I kind of want to preface this with, the goal here isn't embarrassing people. These are organizations like yours, like anyone can make mistakes. And it really is here to demonstrate how easy it is to miss something with APIs, right? Dave, you're out there on the front lines. You see it every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And even just something as simple as running unauthenticated testing, because everybody thinks that you need to go all the way deep into app logic and all the things like that. What you'll see is that app logic is important, but only after you secure your front door, which is the authentication mechanism and that kind of stuff. And we actually have a couple of examples today of completely unauthenticated capabilities that result in very worrisome access into their environment, the infrastructure, and those pieces. And so, yeah, we all know security happens in layers and APIs are no different. So excited to talk about those stories.
Yeah, and I tend to think like API breaches are these complex things. And a lot of times you read these very sophisticated attacks, and some of the things you're going to see today are like that. But more often than not, some pretty basic stuff could have prevented it. And Dave, I definitely want to get your color commentary on some of that stuff, because if we can weave security into the development, into the engineering, into the code, we could have prevented a lot of these things. And it's really difficult for security teams to bolt on security after the fact. It's probably not a WAF rule that would have prevented a lot of these things. All right, let's dive in with the first one. So we got 4 to go through. The first one is frankly the least interesting, if you ask me. This is from XAI, which I guess is like the Elon Musk LLM stuff. Good old fashioned API keys got posted publicly. Credentials can be used to access XAI API with the identity of the user. The associated account not only had access to public Grok models, but also to what appears to be unreleased development and private models. So good old fashioned APIs got leaked. This is from May this year. Dave, This is just one more in a long list of keep your API keys safe.
Yeah, keep your API key safe. I would say that this starts with education. And APIsec University has a course that will help you orient around the OWASP 10 because if the developers they understand the impact of leaked API keys, they're not going to do this nefariously, right? Nobody's putting API keys on purpose into their GitHub repos. It's all either accidental or because they were developing and there's no checks when you're checking in code to see, make sure there's no live tokens, right? It might appear like it's a dummy token or an example token, but it's super, super hard to tell in that case. And so the better policy is to say, we don't publish any real credentials, real, even for testing into GitHub repos, into the applications itself, hard coded. Like that's another thing that we've seen.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The interesting thing, Dave, is I've gotten into vibe coding lately, as you well know, and I don't know anything about coding, right? All of a sudden, it's like creating APIs and I'm using keys and all this kind of stuff. And so at some point, I'm like, make a rule, vibe code, do not hard code API keys, use the .env, blah, blah, blah. And it's, yes, I got it. Don't worry. And then a half an hour later, right, it's got hard coded API keys in the code. And the only way I discovered it is when I did a check in, it also ran some sort of linter or I don't even know what. And it
Wow.
said, oh, by the way, you got hard coded keys. And I'm like, what the hell? I told you not to do this. Like vibe code, okay, it's writing code for you, but you don't even know what's necessarily in there unless you're doing some kind of check.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the vibe coding side, that's all like context window because it'll forget that you told it after you've done a significant amount of work 30 minutes ago, an hour ago, whatever that might be. And so I love Mriganka there that there's an OWASP API 11. Check your vibe code.
Maybe that should be OAuth 0. Come on, people. So this example here of a public API key from XAI from May 1st. And guess what? It's from XAI from June 14th. Another API key published, made available. It had all kinds of access. So it just goes to show, like, even at the same organization, we're seeing this problem repeatedly. And it just seems like one of those things that is so avoidable. There are tools that will scan your code. Even me, like in my vibe coding infancy, some sort of scanner figured out I had these keys in there.
Yeah, there's good tools out there. Trufflehog is one of them, and they're good scanning tools for looking for keys. There's some that look in repos. Yeah, check
Yeah,
those out. They're helpful.
absolutely. Like trust but verify or don't trust and verify. I don't know. All right. So that's that one. Let's go to some more interesting ones. And I'm not sure you've seen all of these, or at least in detail, but this one is from McDonald's. About a month ago, Ian, Carol, and Sam Curry, they're outstanding researchers. These guys that do amazing work. So follow them, find them on Twitter or wherever else. 64 million job applications leaked through an API, right? So this is McDonald's. They have a site called McHire. And if you want to apply, they have this really nice, friendly chat bot that will talk you through the process and ask you the right questions. And in the background, it will create an application for you. So it's really user friendly. And so these guys, they wanted to analyze the traffic and they found these API calls that were going on behind the scenes. When they were looking at it, they found this put call to slash API slash lead slash CEM dash XHR, which I don't know what that means, customer or candidate experience manager or something like that. I don't even know what an XHR request is, but the parameter going to this endpoint was called lead underscore ID. And so their lead ID was 64,185,742. All right. So remember that 742. That's clearly like your applicant number. I guess 64 million people have applied for jobs at McDonald's. So what did they do? They, of course, got rid of the UI and they hit the API directly and they submitted all kinds of different lead IDs. And here the lead ID is now 740. And they hit submit and boom, here comes back the data of Ida Portillo Lopez Clinton and all of her information. It was just incredible. So I don't know if they would be considered an authenticated user at this point, Dave, but they were certainly able to manipulate the lead ID to look up anybody of those 64 million McDonald's applicants.
Yeah, it's hard to tell for sure because I'm looking at the headers in the request and I don't see an authentication header. So it is possible if there is no authentication header there required, this would be fully open and public. Kind of reminds me of the Duolingo breach from before.
Yeah, exactly. Duolingo, you just guess somebody's email address and there you go. All right. Let me ask the community, which OWASP examples does this bring to mind? I could think of at least two. By the way, we got a question here from Andrew Goslin. What is the best vibe coding site for API testing? What do you think there, Dave?
Yeah. I don't know that there are any vibe coding sites that specialize or concern themselves with API testing. I would say you need a tool or some expertise to do it yourself. Andrew, we could maybe dig into your question and what exactly it is you're asking because, yeah, I don't think vibe coding tools concern themselves too heavily with testing APIs themselves.
And at the end of the day, we're talking about application security here. In the good old days of just make sure you don't have any SQL injection or things like that. That's long gone. What are we seeing here? Manipulation of parameters, authorization flaws, logic flaws, and like clicking around in the UI. Like that's not how they breach this. You got to be down there, probably at the API layer, running these different attack simulations. And of course, that's what we do. That's what we're really passionate about here at APIsec. So we do have our own tool. Come check it out. Love to show it to you. I see a lot of bolas, IDORs in the chat. Totally agree. I would say OWASP, so that's OWASP 1, OWASP 2, broken authentication. I mean, it's not broken, it's just not there, which is probably the most common example of broken authentication. So Daniel King, I agree with you there. EDE, I'm not sure what that is, Julius. That's some sort of data exposure, excessive data exposure. There we go. Figured it out. Totally agree. So what is that? OWASP 3. So yeah, right on. So that's McDonald's. Let's keep going. Next one we got is from Wiz, and it's regarding Base 44. I wasn't familiar with Base 44. It's a vibe coding platform. These folks at Wiz do some outstanding research, really impressive stuff. And I think you're going to be blown away by what they did here. Dave, are you familiar with this one? Or is this going to be fresh for you?
This is the first time I'm seeing it.
All right, sweet. Let's dive right in here. Base 44, it's a vibe coding app, and they just want to poke around. And Wiz is really good at like analyzing your surface area. So the first thing they did was scan for subdomains. They found 5 subdomains, passive and active mechanisms or techniques. They didn't find anything interesting, but they did find 2 documentation sites, app.base44.com and docs.base44.com. They took a look at those. And this is what one of those docs pages is, the app.base44 page. And they're like, oh, look at that auth thing. That looks interesting here. The documentation was well organized, several sections, but one section immediately caught our eye, the auth section. And so when they clicked in on that, they got this list of available endpoints, and 2 stood out to them. There's a register endpoint and a verify OTP endpoint. Both were exposed without authentication, even though they were, I think, documented as authenticated endpoints. I'm not sure. But the thing is, if you're going to register on these endpoints, you needed an app ID. In order to really do anything further, they were going to need an app ID. So the question is, how do you find an app ID? So this is where you'll be blown away how they did it. It was right there in the URL. Like, it's literally app ID equals, and it's public. It's in the URL. If you looked at the code, it's in the manifest.json path. So this public information, the app ID is not protected. It's publicly available. And that's the parameter you need to use that registration endpoint and verify endpoint. So what did they do? They needed to create and verify a user on this particular app. So they went here. This is from their write-up. So you can see the curl command, right? So they're going to that app.base44. They're inserting the app ID that they just found, and they're hitting the auth/register endpoint, which then gives them this response that says successful. Check your email for the verification code. And there you go. There's the email verification right in their inbox, just waiting for them. And the next message they got is email verified successfully. You can now log in to anybody's Base 44 application. Dave, what's your reaction here?
Man, I've used a bunch of these tools and like the convenience is awesome. But I would be worried if somebody could get access to those apps because I store interesting stuff in there. Like I store data that is mine, my personal information. And I expect that base 44 or whatever tool that we would use would be putting adequate security around it so that I don't have to think about it. Because frankly, I don't. When I'm
Yeah.
vibe coding, there's this little deploy button in the corner. You can just hit that. Suddenly it's on the internet and it's live. I think that what I'm realizing or what I'm connecting here is like convenience can sometimes come with other trade offs. And so in this case, it may have been very convenient for these to be unauthenticated endpoints, making it easier for the application, making it easy for the users to get access to these. But as soon as you start guessing other people's apps, like what if that's somebody's $1 million idea and
Yeah.
now you've just taken it and all their data?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, it's terrifying here. And I think if we try to step back, like what was the model here that they were using? So they have these endpoints, register and verify, and I guess they have to be unauthenticated. Like you don't have an account at that point. So that's not a flaw here, right? But if I can find any logic gap here, it's that the thing that they were assuming you're going to use to identify the app in this case, that thing is secure in its own way. And that's somehow private, protected information here. What could they have done better? And for the folks listening, you need to give people a way to register. What's a better practice here for doing that?
Yeah.
I'm
Good
curious
question.
in the audience, right? So you got to give people a way to authenticate to, maybe it's got to be approved by the admin. That seems to be like something.
Yeah, like an out of band approval step, something such that this not so happy path that the user took is audited or monitored, or somebody approves the registration onto their application as opposed to just taking the OTP validation as approval because it's not. It's only just validating that your email is connected. And that's
Okay.
not that you're supposed to be accessing this application.
So a lot of folks in the chat are saying 2FA, MFA, but that's just verifying that you're you. It's still not validating that you should be eligible to access this app. And me as the app owner, I should probably have control of that, right? I should be able to approve. VPOL CAPTCHA is still just validating you're not a bot. And if you prove you're not a bot, you still get access to my app. Or so it seems to me like there's a logic gap issue here in the approval process.
I would agree. Like, this is maybe an oversimplification, but it's almost like somebody would go in and say, I'm going to go and register to have access to Dave's email address. And it's like, dude, I don't want that. I should be able to say yes or no to that. But in this case, they just got a direct line through and they got access to not an inbox, but application information. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Seeing some good comments here. Paul, authorization versus authentication. Amen. We hear it all the time. So 2FA, that's all authentication. We're not, so that's, we've got to solve that, but we're missing an authorization issue from zero email domain whitelist. However, that can be bypassed. Yeah, that's not bad. And maybe that's a policy the app owner can control. I want anyone with an APIsec U email address. It's fine if you don't get in. From Jesse, you can implement MFA backwards too, meaning the owner adds your phone number. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so that's where 2FA could work. Like the phone number doesn't come from you, it comes from someone trusted and known. Roderick, methinks you could pick apart and replace/modify anything with Burp Suite. Well, that's often true. That's where authorization is so critical. You can prove you're you, but how do you prove that you're entitled to this thing? So good stuff, folks. Web developers should use encoded authentication data and routers, which does not provide sensitive information in URLs. And amen to that. Maybe this app ID should have been private, or there's a public app ID and then a secret one, and that's the thing that gets used. All right. So that is base 44. So let's go to our last one here. And by the way, there were plenty more that we're gonna have to do more of these sessions, frankly. This is from Vishal Bhaskar, who I've gotten to know, really an incredible individual, and did some outstanding work here on a used Volkswagen that he purchased. And it's pretty cool. It's actually a Medium article and it's behind a paywall. So sorry about that, but you're going to get the gist of it here for sure. He bought a used Volkswagen And the first thing he did, he was really excited about it. He's like, I'm going to install the My Volkswagen app. And what happened is it required sending a 4-digit code, right? But it sent it to the prior owner of the Volkswagen. But believe it or not, he contacted the dealer and was like, I can't register for this thing. It's sending a 4-digit code to the prior owner. And the dealer gave him the phone number of the old owner. And he's like, why don't you try calling that person? See if they'll give you the code. Dude never answered the phone or responded. So he had no way to authenticate and say, this is now my car. So he decided, like, all right, maybe I'll just guess at the code. And he's a pretty enterprising dude and understands APIs. And this is what the request looks like. And you can see he puts down 5555 as the request here. Did not work. He was like, all right, it's 4 digits. It's 10,000 combinations. Maybe I'll just brute force it. So he fired up Burp Suite. He had the community edition of Burp Suite. And he was like, I'll just go like iterate through 10,000. And that just took way too long. Community edition, I don't know if it's rate limited or what it is, right? So he's like, all right, I'm going to write a Python script. And this is what the Python script looks like. And I can't tell a whole lot, but all I see is that range 10,000 in the bottom right corner. But clearly this thing's just like firing off like incremental OTPs at this thing. And eventually he got it. Oh, by the way, the input for this API endpoint is the VIN. You needed to have the vehicle's VIN, vehicle identification number, in order to submit an OTP, which, by the way, is right there on the windshield, visible to the entire world. Like anyone can go look up the VIN of any car. You just walk up to the windshield right there by the driver's side. There it is, right? Visible by design. So he was using his VIN, sending 10,000 requests. Actually, he only had to send 1,436 before vehicle VIN verified successfully. So he could have walked up to any Volkswagen and done exactly this. And it worked. And by the way, so he got access to his car. And so, yeah, mission accomplished. But it goes further than that. And he actually documents 3 separate vulnerabilities. Yeah, look at these reactions from folks. Jose, but there's not rate limiting against brute force? Probably. Actually, I think in this case, there wasn't even that, or it might be confusing with another one. But honestly, like, rate limiting is just going to slow you down. It's not going to prevent you from getting through all 10,000 combinations. Dave,
Yeah.
what are techniques people use to get around rate limiting?
Yeah, you could use bot farms depending on how they identify you. If it's your IP address, you can change your IP address and get a couple new tries. There's a lot of ways to get around rate limiting. And what I'll say is that for all the folks on this call, it's really awesome that you're learning about this, because learning from other people's mistakes will prevent you from falling into some of these same traps. Because Dan presents another breach that has an OTP related vulnerability that allowed people to get access to a social media account. So this is almost identical 2 years later.
Yeah, that was
So
the Instagram password reset. But there is a good point here. I can't remember who talked about like rotating the OTP. And this is what we talk a lot about, like in the Instagram. Like you're absolutely right, folks. If someone tries to hit that OTP more than 5 times, you should retire the code. It's probably one of the best practices you can have. You can't try it 10,000 times. You can try 5. You can fat finger it 5 times, but after that, forget it. You don't get to try anymore. That's a really good way. Another best practice here is stay away from incremental IDs. We talk about this a lot. You just put like an asterisk or a random character, or you just make it alphanumeric. Way harder to brute force that kind of thing than a simple 4-digit number. You're basically saying, hey, attackers, number somewhere between 1 and 10,000. Good luck.
UUIDs are quite a good way to identify objects within applications and APIs. If you look at the math, like it is incredibly significant how many options there could possibly be to identify a UUID. So guessing what they are is not like +1
Oh,
minus
yeah.
1.
Oh,
It's
you don't want to make people type some 20-digit complicated thing, though, do you?
no, but I'm saying instead of a VIN, because you put the VIN in
Ah,
anyway, that's pretty long. Replace the VIN with a UUID that identifies the vehicle, and then people won't be able to guess the
yeah.
vehicles.
Yeah. And Mergang points out, like, set up an alert. Someone brute forcing it. Let's find out who that is. Let's restrict their account, boot them off the system. There you go. If you saw then looked further under the hood, I'm kind of looking at this in detail for the first time, right? Vulnerability one, internal credentials leaked in clear text. The API endpoint exposed passwords, tokens, and usernames for various internal services in clear text. I know this is really hard to see, folks. And we'll write up a blog or something on this, but there you go. He's had to mask them because literally like SFDC password, I'm guessing that's salesforce.com. Like, holy cow, SFDC client ID. What is the one below that? Client secret, LF or LPMS something. What the heck? Like, why would that be in a response? I don't know, Dave. I think they call it BOPLA now, broken object property level authorization. They used to call it excess data exposure, which makes more sense to me.
Mhm.
Like, we see this a lot. Like, you're a developer, you're writing an API, and what data should the API return? Just return the record. And then you give the user of that, which is probably your colleague, another engineer, they get what they want. They can't they're not going to bug you. Wait, I needed this field. So they just return the whole damn thing. And there you go. Now you're leaking passwords and other sensitive info.
Yeah. It's because it's easy. Like people will take the path of least resistance. And so, man, I could just dump this whole database record. Why would I cut it? There's good reasons why you should.
Yeah, and we know there's a lot of pressure on developers. Hit the date, get the release out. Sales is waiting on this feature. It's tough. It's really tough. All right, vulnerability number two, owner's personal details exposed via VIN. Another API endpoint exposed all service and maintenance packages ever purchased for a car accessible using just the VIN number. I'm guessing this is just an open API endpoint that did not require authentication. Maybe it did, but certainly didn't have authorization to say, are you allowed to see this other person? So it sounds like whether he authenticated or not, he could submit any VIN and it would return all this pretty sensitive information. I put it down there at the bottom. It was too hard to paste the screenshot, but look at all those fields, all those columns that have been returned.
Man,
Pretty remarkable.
I'm pretty sure this is like a challenge in the crappy vulnerable API, like directly. I think there's a challenge that legitimately uses a VIN to go and get data about other users. Man, they probably should have gone through that workshop.
Yeah, that's actually true. And Crappy is like a car simulator app. All right. Vulnerability number three, vehicle service history accessible via VIN. Sounds like same sort of thing here, but instead of getting owner information, you get all their service records. And it even had things like survey responses. You could type your comments and think this was a great service or blah, blah, blah. Like all that information was also accessible here. Just another example of excess data exposure. So that's what we got for you folks. Curious what everyone's saying. Did you learn something here today? Are you going to go back and talk to your colleagues or your engineers and go check if you got the right authorization in place and you're not exposing sensitive information? But Dave, are you surprised by any of these? I haven't been on the front lines of this stuff for a few years now. Is this sort of, man, aren't we past this by now?
Yeah. I've almost like worried to answer the question is no, I'm not really surprised because we do see it all the time. And in this case, I think maybe fortunate for the organization, there were some ethical hackers that were the first, hopefully, to get to it.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's a really good story for hunting these down yourself and finding them before your adversaries do. And
Yeah.
so organizations understand this. They've got red teams, they've got AppSec programs and stuff, but focusing on the API as a unique entity because the attack vectors are slightly different than web applications or other traditional types of software, it really does benefit to be a student of the folks who have identified these issues so that you can keep yourself above water and have the
Yeah.
best chance of keeping your data and your customers' data safe.
Absolutely. And one of the best things that we can do, we do these workshops for folks. We do them public on our website like every quarter or so. And what's cool is it's a great way to step up in your organization and be a champion of API security, raise awareness in your company, in your team, in your department about API risk. So these workshops, they're 1 hour talks. I do them publicly, but I've probably done 100 plus for big companies, little companies, everything in between. And we cover why APIs are under attack, real world breaches like we just did. We map them to the OWASP top 10, and then we provide some really tactical best practices, a lot of stuff that we've talked about here. So, folks, October is a great time to do it. You've got Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Use this as an opportunity to step up and bring API security awareness to your organization. We'd love to set them up for you. So check it out, appisecuniversity.com/workshop, and you can request. It'll be our pleasure to do that for you. Let me see here. We got a question here from Franklin. What tools can we use to find bugs in API on Windows? Can we monetize this competence? You certainly can. That's what bug bounties are all about. In fact, jump into our Discord server. We've got an incredible community there. We're doing live hacks and things like that to help folks learn how to go and test their APIs. But back to the Windows question. Does it really matter what platform the APIs are running on, Dave?
Yeah, it doesn't quite matter. I wonder if Franklin's asking, he's using Windows, he's looking for a tool. I think,
Got it.
there are a couple. APIsec U has a great page. I think it's under tools and resources. Okay, cool. And there's a link with a bunch of open source scanners and GitHub projects, things that you might be able to apply. So I might start there. And then, of course, like Burp has a free tier, which I think you can always get involved. And if you really want to know how to start to activate Burp, the pen testing course, the API pen testing course is a good one. It's,
Yeah.
I don't know, 12 hours long, and it's hands-on keyboard hacking and breaking real APIs. So if you're technical and you want to get started over there, that's a good one. But
Yeah.
yeah, come back and let us know, Franklin, if you find some interesting resources on that page.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. There's tons of good stuff. So come to the AppySec U site. We got courses, hit the tools and resources. You'll find a bunch of great tools in there. And then Discord, absolutely amazing.
I have one that, Dan, it's not quite a breach. It's a vulnerability. And I'll start by saying that I feel the company has done quite a good job of responding to this. I'm always curious, what does it take to get a CVSS of 10, like 10.0, like as high as the CVSS score goes? It's a Cisco ISE unauthenticated remote code execution vulnerability.
Into the
So what does that mean? Unauthenticated remote code execution. So anyone can show up and run code on your server based on this vulnerability. And again, I think Cisco's doing a pretty good job of handling it, like patching it and doing all of those things. Now, not only does the code execute, it executes as root. So you basically get carte blanche, blank check to do anything you want as root on the server without authentication. That's what it takes to get a 10 on the CVSS score.
Yeah. If anyone's looking at it, yeah, CVSS score 10.0. It's a perfect score.
Yeah,
Wow.
that is a big one.
I see a lot of comments here. Let's do more of these things. Sadly, there's no lack of examples. I got plenty more that we can go through. Dave, thanks for being here. Love to bring you back for future sessions as well.
This was a blast. Thank you, everyone. And thanks for everyone who attended. I actually see a lot of familiar names in here. Like, this community is really tight knit. Like, I've seen tons of these
Yeah.
people before, and they ask really good questions. Really bravo to all of the audience. This was a really fun session.
Yeah, it's what makes this a ton of fun. And I think we get a lot of benefit from the comments because we're all figuring it out just like you all are. And AI and vibe coding, it's a whole new kind of wild west out there. So we got to learn from each other. And with that, we'll call it a day. Thanks, everybody. Dave, we'll see you around. And until next time, take care.
All right. Thank you. See ya.